Hi.
Oh.
It's nice to see
And
you.
Alec. Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Oh my God. How are you?
Good. I'm Peter Stebbins. I'm checking in. I'm going to project it on the wall so my face will disappear. But I'm so excited to catch this live. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
So nice to see everyone. I'm going to give folks just a minute and we'll get started, but I know it's hard to keep track of time, the weird ether we all exist in, so I'm going to give folks just a bit, but it's so nice to see so many familiar faces, and I love the beginning and the end when people say hi and feel like we're in your living rooms.
Oh, and I just saw the second row of people. Hi, everybody. Hi, Ruth. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Susan
Hi.
and everyone.
Hi.
Lillian. Hello.
Peter, hi.
FWM apprentice in the house.
So we might just go ahead and get started. I know we are going to have some more folks on the call, and I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on that waiting room. Jodi, I might ask while I'm talking if you don't mind letting folks in, just so they don't miss things. Thank you. But welcome everyone. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces, some new faces. I'm Abby King, the Assistant Director of Adult Programs at PAFA. And we are so excited for this partnership program tonight, our PAFA Pours on Big Wash, a Conversation. I wanted to start by thanking everyone at the Fabric Workshop for partnering with us. You're one of my favorite institutions in the city, as well as PAFA too, but one of my favorites to work with. And I wanted to, of course, thank Christina Roberts, their Director of Education, for reaching out and making this possible. Thanks, Christina. Thank you to all the Fabric Workshop members in the audience, and of course to all of our PAFA members here today. If you haven't already, please consider supporting one or both of these fantastic Philadelphia institutions. And since this is our happy hour program, I wanted to say cheers to all of you. Thank you so much for being here with us, raising a seltzer, glass tea, whatever is getting you through the moment. Great to be here with you. And so, quick Zoom things. I'm going to ask you to stay muted for this program. That again doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. We do. So please feel free to drop things in the chat as we go. We have a fabulous presentation with Jonathan, Karen, and Jodi. I'm going to introduce them in just a second. But note that we will have time at the end to hear from you live. So you can drop questions in the chat, or also feel free to raise your hand when we get to the end, the Q&A, and I'll talk about that later on, but we want to hear from you. You can wave us down or click the raise hand button. I also need to mention that we're recording tonight's event, so if you know of anyone who wanted to be here with us but couldn't, know that we'll be uploading it to our PAFA YouTube channel later in 24 hours to 48 hours or so, but note that it will be up and we can share that with you, and I'll drop a link to our library of programs because we've been at it since March, and there's a lot of wonderful backlog catalog if you're looking for more content during the winter months coming up. Other than that, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat for me directly. Again, thank you for everyone for being here with us. I'm now so pleased to introduce our speakers. So Jonathan Lyndon Chase has lived and worked in Philadelphia their whole life, receiving their MFA from PAFA in 2016. As a fellow alum, it's so great to have you here. Chase has received numerous awards from PAFA and the University of Arts in Philadelphia, and was recently announced as a 2019 fellow by the Pew Center for Arts and Heritage. Represented by Company Gallery in New York, Chase's work resides in numerous public and private collections throughout the world, including the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art in LA, the Walker Center in Minneapolis, and the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. Chase has had 2 publications released for their recent solo exhibition Sheets in 2018 and Quiet Storm in 2018. and has been featured in numerous periodicals, including GQ, the New York Times, and the Los Angeles Times. And of course, I have to mention their fabulous exhibition, soon to be on view, but already installed at the Fabric Workshop and Museum here in Philadelphia. Speaking of that, our second speaker, Karen Patterson, joined the Fabric Workshop and Museum as their inaugural curator in July 2019. Prior to this appointment, she was the senior curator at the John Michael Kohler Arts Center in 2012. Over the past 7 years, Patterson has curated over 50 exhibitions, including major exhibitions such as the Ray Yoshida's Museum of Extraordinary Values, Ebony G. Patterson, Dead Trees, several critically reviewed site-specific installations such as Joy Feasley and Paul Swenbach, Out, Out, Josephine Candle, Things Are What We Encounter, and Dr. Charles Smith and Heather Hart. And lastly, my colleague, curator of contemporary art, Jodi Throckmorton, who joined PAFA in the fall of 2014. As our contemporary curator, Throckmorton oversees PAFA's contemporary art exhibitions and acquisitions. Throckmorton came to PAFA from the Ehrlich Museum of Art at Wichita State University in Kansas, where she served as the curator of modern and contemporary art. Prior to that, she was the associate curator at the San Jose Museum of Art. She's organized and exhibited many wonderful exhibitions, including Dive Deep, Eric Fischel and the Process of Painting, Rena Banerjee, Make Me a Summary of the World in 2018, Melt, Carve, Forge, Embodied Sculptures by Castles, and Fernando Orellana, His Study of Life in 2016. I'm so excited to welcome to our Zoom forum tonight these three fantastic humans. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to now turn it over to Karen to share her screen. And thank you all.
I think I'm kicking it off. Is that right, Karen?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, Abby. No, thank you. Thank you very much for the introductions and hello and welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. And I want to thank Karen Patterson and the entire Fabric Workshop team for collaborating with us on this event. And especially thank you to Jonathan Lyndon Chase. It is so wonderful to have you here and to get the chance to celebrate you and your first museum solo show, which is quite an accomplishment. So congratulations to you and the entire Fabric Workshop team. We all look forward to seeing it. We were all so close. So one day, hopefully soon. We thought this was an incredible moment to go a little bit into your past, Jonathan, considering you graduated from PAFA in 2016, which was a short 4 years ago, and yet you have done so much in the last 4 years. So you know, and like your work, really, your career has crisscrossed Philadelphia from UArts to PAFA to the Fabric Workshop Museum, and so we're so happy to be here with you tonight. So thank you. And if Karen, you wouldn't mind sharing your screen, we are going to get in our time machines and go back to 2016 when we could all go into the museum together. And I was able to dig up an iPhone photo that I took from Jonathan's annual student exhibition in 2016. So I apologize for the photo quality, but I was really happy that we were able to find that. I was so lucky to get to see this installation, and I remember well getting to know your work then and absolutely falling in love with it. And what was really wonderful as well is that we were able to purchase the Untitled piece that you see in the middle of the installation. So Jonathan also became one of many important accomplished artists that PAFA has been able to purchase right out of their student exhibitions. And so Jonathan, I see a lot of resonance between even this small installation and the Fabric Workshop show when you're already thinking about the relationship between painting and sculpture and installation, for example. But I'm wondering if you could take us back and talk a little bit about, you know, what you were exploring during graduate school and how this final project turned out for you.
Thank you, Jodi. I first want to say thank you for everybody for tuning in on Fabric Workshop, Philadelphia Contemporary, and PAFA for joining us today. This is such an honor. I'm super excited. So if we jump back in our time machine, it seems like this was really recent. This is my thesis show for my MFA final, and you can see like there's like a chair. I have like a bottle sculptural object behind like a painting that's kind of like stemming up from the wall. just above it on the right, kind of like a portrait of a few figures on some soft sheet material. And then the other two that are just
Uh-oh.
really wanted to like think about is ways that I can use the material, such as like the kind of soft cotton sheet material on the right is from just like my home. So I draw lots of references to the domestic, which I'll talk about in greater detail. And I have like this chair that came from my home as well. So thinking about the complexities of bodies and the space that they're in, the material, thinking about it in those ways too, to kind of complicate the relationship to the two was really important to me. There's like glitter, acrylic, oil, Sharpie marker, watercolor, a glass bottle, a wood chair, and these kind of harder objects that it's balancing on are bone dry uh, ceramics. So I was definitely, yeah, like just thinking about ways I could like experiment really with a different variety of materials to really consider like the ways that a painting can kind of like exist in a space, and definitely thinking about compositionally ways to kind of like talk about the marriage between paintings, flatness, and the wall.
And the acquisition, the untitled piece in the middle here, which I think we have a good image of on the next slide. That's also in this very private domestic home space as well. They're on a bed in a bedroom. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Yeah.
bedrooms have been many studios I've been painting in, have been bedrooms in the past and still now. And it's also just like a symbol that I reoccurringly use. It's a place for intimacy and vulnerability inside of like these like more private spaces.
And such a I've always seen it as like a beautiful calming embrace is what I remember seeing the work for the first time. And you know, your painting gives me the feels, I guess. Like it's always these wonderful moments of intimacy that I think really jump off the canvas. I mean, one of my questions about this work, if you don't mind, that I've always had is I've always felt like with the text at the bottom or something, that it was like I was looking at this through an additional screen, or there was some sort of something between me and the painting or me and the scene. And I've always been curious about where that comes from, or what that is.
Yeah, that's a great question. So text enters my work in like a variety of ways. Sometime more than often, like poetry or like haptics, like sound. So for this one, it is like a timestamp. So sometime I'll use like color to indicate like nighttime or daytime. And for this one, it's just like a certain time of evening. So that kind of thinking of it as like a temporal space or a way to talk about like time and space relative to each other. And also with this particular time, just thinking about space that's at nighttime, the evening, these timestamps that a different kind of behavior kind of comes out. Yeah,
Mm.
at that evening time where you're like settling down and you're unwinding and things like that.
Unwinding, having a cup of tea in an intimate moment. That's lovely. Thank you. Well, and I have to ask because we likely have a few students that have joined us. So thinking about your incredibly quick trajectory through the art world, UArts, PAFA, major exhibitions, major museum acquisitions, residencies, all those wonderful things. I have to ask, a well-deserved success, incredibly well-deserved, but I have to ask if there are any lessons that you learned on this fast pace. How do you keep yourself grounded?
Oh, wow. So one of like the important lessons that I learned is to be as honest to yourself as possible, right? To try to live as unapologetically as you possibly can. And in those ways you can really discover like what's at stake for yourself, what really matters. It's really great to also be active in a community. Like I would really suggest making lots of like strong relationships. Like I have like friends from even undergrad at UArts and at PAFA that we have really great relationships about art, life, and stuff like that. Um, I also, yeah, like I just think about to just a part of my process, what we'll get into a little bit later, thinking of a way in the system to balance your the lines kind of blur a lot of times for a lot of us, right? Like as being an artist, but thinking of ways to practice self-care and mindfulness to balance in some ways, at least for me, kind of like the more chaotic nature of how I work.
Mm. And that's always something that I've said to you before in the past about your Instagram account that I've always loved. I feel like there's an encouragement that happens through your Instagram account. I feel like it's a whole nother part of your work, frankly, that has to do with self-care and mental health that I really respect. So and I did bring in one last slide to show from PAFA, and that's the 2019 acquisition of Hush, because it connects us right in this year with the fabric workshop. Certainly you see the clothing, the hats, the sculptural part of your work coming through, as well as we were talking about the sound. I mean, it's text, shh, but I can't help making that sound with it, which immediately took me to the bubbles in Big Wash in the fabric workshop show. So I'm gonna kick it off to you and Karen to let you all talk about those early moments of this collaboration.
Thank you, Jodi. So we are picking up in 2019 with a studio visit. One of my first studio visits as a new resident to Philadelphia. And these were the things, as you were talking, that I was sneaking photos of, because I was struck by the intimacy that we've talked about in your work and this tenderness that happens, but also this relationship to domestic and home. And so what we're looking at here are some detail shots of you painting on bed sheets, and then also having just this kind of comfort of a bed in your studio that I deeply admire. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what that studio space means to you, and a little bit about painting on alternative materials.
Yeah. For me, like I was just like talking to someone earlier about just the different studios that I've had. So thinking about the domestic a lot, how important it is to me, makes sense and kind of flows into these ideas of like a bedroom being like a private intimate space, and the studio for me is like really much so like that. So as I was just describing to Jodi, that lines kind of get blurred a lot in a way that I think is like really beautiful and nourishing. The studio space for me is like an extension of my home. So like I have this space that is like really freeing and liberating to me to kind of self-reflect and experiment with these concepts dealing with existing as like a queer black person living in Philly, living with bipolar, being fat bodied, non-gender conforming. And this is like a safe place for me to just kind of like run towards like some of my chaotic tendencies, my vulnerability in ways that I can sort of think of myself mindfully, not like these sort of demons of like self-doubt, but still kind of like running towards it and embracing it no matter what happens. So it's safe in that way. You can see like so like this image on the left is on canvas. So when I'm working with like different materials, which can be like this is a bed sheet in back of me, one that is from the same set that I've been using. There's one in the actual show, Big Wash, and so there's like satin, polyester. I really love working on like muslin, and working on bed sheets that are gifted from friends sometime. Ones that I live with, just like like in my bedroom space. And for like canvas, like it does something different to the world in the space. So on like a technical level, like is prime, just sold, and everything, and it comes like in sort of like a different stable way, which access me from the material to only work with certain materials on it, like oil pastel and stuff like that. While if you look like just down, you'll see like some like cowboys. So I work with lots of like found fabric too, and thinking about like patterns and how like that pattern itself is kind of in like a more grit like or kind of loose flowing way.
Yeah.
Um like grids or spaces of navigation, sound a lot or smell. So this painting at the bottom was from my recent solo show, a company gallery, Wind Rider, and I was dealing with motifs of cowboys and autobiographical stuff about my grandmother. Which if we go over to like the one on the right, you'll notice a bed. So in 2018, I was working on like two major shows and just like the trajectory kind of going off like a rocket, all of these things happening. My grandmother just kind of out of the blue passed away. So I was dealing with a lot of just like grief and like these really extreme, complicated emotions that I hadn't dealt with before in that way. Like she was like a third parent to me. So I spent the entire summer living in her bedroom, sleeping on her bed, and then it made its way into my studio. So in that way, that's like kind of like a artifact or intimate object that I just needed to have there. And I definitely like take naps on it and stuff still. Like I just kind of draw and read on it. I changed the bed sheets on it, so sometimes those come into play too. It's like a kind of memory and body like residue of just my flesh being on it, and like kind of thinking of like my emotions being charged on it. um
Well,
the
it was a really charged environment in the studio. I have to, if I remember correctly, we were having a lot of discussions about materials and about home and about being homebodies and about the idea of tenderness and being together. And that's when I met your husband, Will, as well. And but these sneaky photos were a way for us to talk a little bit about the opportunity at the Fabric Workshop to work with our printing program and our screen printing tables, knowing that you do live so honestly and true to your vision, that and you will be willing to experiment, was a green light for me to be like, okay, let's see if we can do this together. And so I wanted to kind of push us through to that moment when you started screen printing with us. And I also want to just coast through some of another hint into the way to your process, which is your notes and and the way that your binder that you gave me, which was so exciting. For all of us who don't know, part of Jonathan's process is just keeping record of the day, whether that shows up in a poetry or scraps of paper or materials, um, drawings. Maybe these will show up later in a work, maybe they won't, but they're a way to, as a synopsis of the day, whether it was complicated or not. And Jonathan was very generous in lending me that binder. And so I was able to look through and read some poetry and see some of these amazing drawings. And just, this is a great example of seeing this public/private in your notes and knowing that that's exactly what we're addressing in the show. And because you see it and now I see it too. So do you want to talk a little bit about just the importance of that binder?
Yeah. So some of the things like you were describing, like things I find in the world, like different found objects. I really am drawn to like assemblage. I'm always kind of when I'm like not painting, I kind of like switch gears, right? So that could look like reading, or in this case, organizing themes and sort of like reflecting on like just the speed of like my mind and like the desire and urgency to always kind of constantly be making. So that's one way I kind of like stabilize and kind of bring order to all of like the chaos and energy. um,
Right.
I take lots of photographs myself that enter in. The one of the first images you were showing, I write lots of poetry, so they can come before or after a work, kind of to a work. And yeah, I always tell my students, like, it's really great to keep a record of like your trajectory and to seeing the relationships of things that are happening over like just like your lifetime. So they're definitely for me like living documents.
And I almost think of the screen print that you designed as a living document too, that it seems like a record. And so I wanted to get to that process a little bit as we go through a little hint of what's to come, a washing machine here. And then the larger washing machine that we'll see later on in this presentation. There's Jonathan, and you are starting to work with the studio on designing your print. We'll stop at a few moments, but this is like a really great comparison between your binder and the notes in your binder and how you work with Zach Ingram, our print project coordinator, on translating those ideas into this pattern. That's going to be a repeat pattern for yardage. Do you want to talk about the key motifs of the butterfly and the rose that we see here?
Yeah. So butterflies are coming into the work thinking about like states of change and being liminal. I'm thinking about our body temporally with like life and death. And in ways like playing off of like their boxer shorts that they eventually turn into. So playing with like even word play like butterfly. The Some of them have like these like faces in them, which are for me like their own kind of space intimately and like this like bigger kind of communal relationship with like other butterflies just like flying and like gliding and like wading through this garden of like roses are a recurring motif for me, just in like all of my work. Thinking about something very beautiful and delicate and precious, and then also it kind of having thorns that kind of protect itself from being like plucked potentially.
Mm.
And like the petals, like I use them to kind of reflect or talk about pleasure points of the body, like soft points, like nipples, anuses, penises, things of that nature. So in lots of ways, like they represent different parts of the the body.
So this is one of the first steps of creating the yardage. And then you're placing them carefully with Zach to see how that might translate into for the screen printing process. And then here we are with this beautiful print that has references to a loose plaid pattern that we talked about earlier, because we knew that some of this might translate into boxer shorts. Some of it was going to become essentially canvas for a new body of work that we're going to look at. But then there was also this boxer idea too. So that's where that plaid pattern comes in. And this is for everyone who hasn't been to the fabric workshop. This is our 6th floor. And I only say that, I do know which floor it is, but it is just such a stunning experience to be on that floor because our tables are 19 yards long. And so here you are just double checking that everything is good. So on one side, you see a more finished pattern, and then you can start seeing the layering that happens in screen printing. So with the other pattern that hasn't yet had the darker color overlay on it. And there's your husband, Will. Winter without masks, seems like a lifetime ago. And then we come to the work that came for Big Wash. And so this is one of the first paintings that I remember seeing. This is an install shot. And I wanted just to talk briefly about what it meant to translate your process into the screen printing process, like the flattening of an image, the repeat pattern. How did that affect your process?
Um, so it was really, really interesting working, just coming into it with ideas of like collage, flatness in different ways, and pattern and grid. So for these paintings, like I was really thinking about different ways I can kind of complicate like the field of the flatness, like what's pushing in, what's pushing out. Um,
The door does a great job of doing that. The door does a great job of like pushing us in and bringing us closer. It's great.
Thank you. The like the process like itself, learning about like my speed and my energy, and how I'm very much more impatient than I realized. Like
We all
painting allows like a different speed. So like processes just with making like the silk screen print involves lots of layers, which are something that I use like thinking of like a body as like something layered like an onion. Um and when I was thinking about just like in different ways like patterns just kind of show up, whether it's like decor, fashion items, like here, these two paintings are about music. So the show is kind of like in this way time stamped or about like the early 2000s. So like when once upon a time MVT used to actually play music videos, so these are about music videos and video vixens. So you'll see like the pattern on like these kind of thong bathing suits to the image to the left, and then like the boxers actually for like these like rappers and R&B singers who are just kind of like on top of a car, like kind of doing their thing. So these were very much inspired by definitely fashion at that time. And this person has like a vibrating phone. That's a collage part. So like the collaging with this like actually layering on top and like pushing like paint back, but still in a way kind of like harmonizing them so that they're so different but they actually do make sense in this more kind of unexpected way.
And so then one of the things that we wanted to also discuss, and this is great to kind of remind us what it was like in your studio. You see the bed sheet or the domestic textile here, and just this idea of home with this beautiful rose light that's coming from this dining room table. And this, we'll get to some of the writing below it, but just the sweetness about home. And I don't want to give it away, but I do want to talk a little bit about we aren't talking about home for the whole show, but it is a place that you visit with this installation. And so we'll get to that, but I wanted to talk a little bit, one of my favorite parts of your paintings is just the dangling kind of just like flopping of the sheets at the bottom of the paintings. So could you talk a little bit about the draping?
Yeah. For me, like a lot of times too, I'll think of like the canvas and like just the history of like the square in relationship to painting. So for me, like bodies are uneven, spaces are messy. I'm really interested in like spilling things out of the picture plane, which you'll see like in some of the other images. So like this is like this dinner table, and like when you're at a dinner table, like the way that the cloth kind of just like falls off on the sides and things like that, and wanting to kind of like really break away from like that sort of convention of like evenness and like straightness, like the sort of expectancy of it, which I find like always like really really fun to do. Sometimes the painting will be sort of like crooked on one side, as I'm thinking of like just bodies. I consider my paintings to be like very soft even on like edges and like around it.
So if we go back to one of your notes and we talked about the idea of being public and private. And when people are able to experience this exhibition, we'll start to understand that there's bodies that are navigating the public and the private. And in the previous slide, it was dining rooms and home. This is also home, but what I love about this here, and I'll talk a little bit about the install process, but just the use of light in showing a tender moment at home, whether it's darkness and something maybe nefarious is about to happen and sexy. And then on the other, like this morning light that's happening when you're washing the dishes. And then just some hints with actual objects from the kitchen, the radio's playing, just a hint, you start really starting to piece together a scene from home. So that's one of the places, as we started putting the works together in the show, we wanted to group the paintings by the places that these bodies might navigate. And so on one side, the individual painting, another beautiful way that you use light to convey some warmth and glow from the home. And then on the other side, a grouping of another place, Foreman Mills, which is an infamous store that I did not know about, but I thank you for introducing me to. And the idea of the body navigating that space. And I really love some really key aspects of these paintings, which is the transparency of the body itself through the money print of the paintings. So if you could talk a little bit about what the body is experiencing at Foreman Mills.
Yeah, Foreman Mills for me is like just been just so a part of my life, and I really, really love it. There's so many different types of like just like clothes for different bodies, and for me being like a non-gender conforming person, and like a fat body, I'm often kind of trying to navigate uh this like hyper visibility, like thinking of the space that kind of contradicts or sets parameters for your body. So like the space of the Furman Mills is like nostalgic, then it's also kind of like this uh like money space, like there's like money like involved in order for you to interact with the space in a particular way. So these are kind of about anxiety, mostly, whether that's like affording to buy something, finding clothes that like fit your body in such a way. My own personal closet just has like basically wherever I feel like wearing. um and like these like transparencies are kind of like showing how you kind of feel like a little bit see through in this sort of way, just like the way that your body from like an outside is being interacted with like a certain kind of lens. At the same time, your body just kind of like melanin glowing, like our skin like glows and is like transparent, temporally shifting through like a space.
And I wonder if I could just ask a quick question that's related to Foreman Mills a little bit. And that's the Philly question. Philly is a reoccurring muse in your work, certainly places like Foreman Mills, but also just, you know, certainly aesthetically, I see Philadelphia in your work everywhere I look. And I'm wondering if you could talk about, you know, what is the ongoing fascination with Philadelphia? I think we would all have our own wonderful answers for that, but curious how you see the city playing out in your work.
For me, maybe complicated, but simply at the same time, when I think of the domestic, I think of home, and Philly is my home. So it makes sense for me to, in that public social space, like that cosmopolitan, like kind of canopy of like that kind of outside world, for me to always be drawing like influences, everything from like the architecture to the colors, the sound I hear. All of my friends and family are here. And like these things like go into my archive too. I'm constantly taking found objects off the street. I just drive around taking just like pictures for references. I can easily strike up a conversation with someone that's talking about something like, you know, just like a mundane thing, like doing your laundry or going to a store, or them talking about someone who's significant to them. Yeah, like in those ways, like the sort of emotional attachment is definitely there. And then just sort of what the city provides is like a landscape of just like material and sensory. It's like just like really like interesting to me.
So in some ways, it's another private space. It's another comfortable private space where you're navigating.
Yeah, like I feel like there's always like really like delicious things that I'm so well acquainted with Philadelphia. But one of the great things about Philadelphia too is that you always can find just like something new on like a micro and a macro. Like it's kind of like mysterious in that way, I think.
And so now we're starting to talk a little bit about the building of the installation and what our process was. In some ways, I was the kind of, I'll hang the paintings and you come in and complicate it. And you came and complicated it with beautiful writing on the walls, adding your own drawings as well. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what, as we start showing more and more of the installation, what do you think that you being able to interact with the space, both before you started installing and now, what does that do to your process when you're installing, and why is writing and writing on the walls important to you?
Mm-hmm. I do this thing where I really believe, like, because I'm like mad sensitive and I'm always thinking of ways to like protect and like honor and take witness to my energy. So essentially being mindful, right, of my landscape, my emotional landscape, my physical landscape. And it's always like really loving, but at times like scary to like have your work go out into the world. And whenever I do like a show or a project, I just kind of take off my shoes, and I believe like you can absorb, for me, like you can absorb like the energy of the space through like my skin, like the roots of my feet. So when I was kind of going in, getting like acquainted, kind of like dating the space, before like my babies went in there, like my paintings, that was kind of like the first step. And just kind of early thinking about compositional things, lighting, echoes of sound, like the way that subtly the floor shifts in different ways. And when a certain point, I feel like my paintings start to talk to me, and like it has like a loud enough voice, like it's developed so much as a body that it can, then I can start having a conversation with it on like different terms. So that conversation can start by a poem, of an idea. Like I feel like I approach poetry as like a painter. So like it'll start off as like kind of like an image inspired text, like a poem, or it can go the other way where I'm like talking to the painting, and like how there's like the drapery there, and like how you see like hangers kind of on the wall, like there's a fork, like the hangers are kind of entering like the middle ground space between sort of the reality of like the work and then like into like our space. And in this case, like the space, all of like the historical energy, like the people who came before me, on like the actual gallery's walls. So like you'll see like a little butterfly kind of like floating out from where there's like the window of like the dining room house, like that domestic area. And then there's like a fork, and you can see like some poetry text just under it. So like this fork, for me, thinking of like a sound in the physical space of it, like if it just were sort of like rolling off of the table.
Hmm. You do have an ability to, you made that space your own, and you made it very site specific and Jonathan specific, um, by adding the text and by adding like the teardrops and the roses and the butterflies, and it really brought everything together, it being one big site specific installation. And the site that we chose to explore was the laundromat. And so I wanted to get right into that. If anyone remembers a slide with your sketch of those kind of laundromats on the top, that was one of the first paintings that we knew where it was going to go. And then there's the butterflies on the top, these beautiful puffy sinks that I die for, and then washing machines that you came and painted with the days of the week, and how a laundromat can help you pace your week and what you do when you do your laundry, things like that. And then we start getting into the actual laundromat. And the way that the exhibition is designed is that the laundromat kind of sits in the middle of the space where, and all those groupings of paintings, whether it's Foreman Mills or the basement or the street or the living room or the windows, are all different spaces that these bodies navigate, and they all come together in one way or another. They bring their stories and their histories to laundromat, which is a great way to explore private and public, because it is a public space, but it is full of your private things. And so that's where the boxers kind of really showed up for both the print and but I wanted you to talk a little bit about these sculptures, the people in the laundromat.
Yeah, they're like one of my favorite things that I was running towards with the show, especially like thinking of my relationship to sculpture, being a painter, like thinking back to like the early images on the slide with the thesis and like a early kind of indication of my ideas getting away from the wall. These are like muslin fabric that was cut to a certain shape, and then they were sewn together, and I stuffed them with like cotton and like some soft and like a balancing material to make them balanced. And once I was able to fill them, then the sort of like that was the canvas. So it gave me the shape that I was able to start making decisions about where the lines bend and fold, how the paint would kind of shift. And, you know, it's like 3 dimensions. So like the light behaves like a different way. So this person is like with their Furman Mills bag, like going into like this public space to wash their clothes. Um, in terms of like fashion, like Juicy Couture was really big in the 2000s, like Baby Fat, Fubu, all of like these sort of brands that I think staple and iconicize like that space. And they're holding like this phone, which was like flip phones were like all the rage then. And like that just like makes me think of like those nostalgic elements and thinking about how we communicate each other, like communication being something we're thinking about so much now that we are now so separated from each other. So that's definitely something that I've been thinking about like a lot, like the laundry space being like this liminal space that people transition through, and how we all like do have like a lot more in common do we do have different. um yeah, this one here, so like you'll notice like it's like a black and white kind of checkerboard, like a grid. So I thinking of like those colors in the grid as one way in a public space, like different things are like demanded from us. So for one like thing, the performance of our gender. So this person here is like wearing like a dress and like they have their purse, and they're like more femme presenting or non-binary presenting. And they're in like this laundry mat, and sort of some of the things thinking about like in the Foreman Mills paintings with their being like in the store shopping, that was like a certain kind of anxiety. But with this one, I kind of want to talk about like an opposite of kind of just like more confidence and being able to navigate without that kind of burden of like violence being projected onto your body. Yeah, this is the back of them. Like there's like I treat it the same way I treat my painting surfaces, just kind of adding on different like items and like assemblage kind of qualities.
So I think we're getting close to Q&A, and so I think but I do want to talk a little bit about cleansing, and maybe someone can ask a little bit about that. But we'll leave this image here because it's so great, and it kind of brings it all together of you in the laundromat and thinking about sending those boxers off to loved ones in the city. But I also wanted to give a chance for everyone to ask you questions as well. Jodi, would you think it's best for me to stop sharing my screen? What was the ideal format here?
I think so. We can see, you know, if anyone wants to put a question in the chat, or please feel free to unmute yourself and jump right in, or, you know, use one of the reactions, and I'll try to look for you. And yeah, please ask Jonathan questions. If not, oh,
It's okay. I'm shy too.
I just wanted
yeah.
to note that we can't see the show right now at the Fabric Workshop, so these should be very enticing images for you. I didn't give it all away though. There is lots more to see in person, and we hope when we reopen in the new year that you'll all join us there. We also have a really great collaboration with Philadelphia Contemporary on a radio program called with Love Johns called well, great. Ash will put the details in there. The show itself is open until June, but we hope that you'll join us for another opening in January, on January 8th. Lots of great collaborations there. So,
and I have questions of, oh, good, Brooke. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Excuse me, Jodi. Hi, everyone. It's so good to gather, especially after a day of board meetings. Karen and Jonathan, could you two talk a little bit about the checkerboard floor in relationship to the bubbles, which I hope weren't just added in the photography online. I hope it's in person for real. But I'm just interested in the relationship they have to each other, sort of soft hard. But that checkerboard floor is amazing in the gallery. So I'm just wondering how that evolves since you've spent some time talking about the exhibition tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks amazing too. Just
Thank you.
should have started with that. It looks incredible.
Thank you so much. So the checkerboard flooring, like in my old neighborhood, I used to live in Fifth and Alany. That was something that was inspired from that, like visually. There's just like green and white, but I went for like two kind of like almost neutrals, like black and white, like kind of like a binary. So for the show, when you think about for me, this idea of cleansing, that looks like sort of like the residue of like the things that are projected and expected upon our bodies and our identities. So I'm like bubbles, they're flowing, they're fluid. Not each bubble looks the same. The washing machine is kind of being a homage to the things I've learned and honor about the domestic. And with the sculptures, they're kind of like these like bodies that are complicated, that don't sort of like fit in like one place. They're kind of like contrasting or against more fluid against like the binary of the kind of grid of the checkerboard floor.
Thank
just
you.
to pick up on the soft hard, that in some ways the bubbles act as that blurring of the binary, don't they? They like, it's not black and white, it's not as clear. And look at these beautiful, precious, and precarious things that are blowing across the room to remind us that the world is a bit softer than that and a little bit more delicate. Yeah.
And the same thing as you're thinking about the parts coming off the canvases out of that square, there's like a real interesting relationship to modernism and painting then when you're talking about the grid as well. And we do have a question in the chat from Dory Miller. When you were showing the 6th floor screen printing process and mentioned the boxer shorts, I had no idea until I saw them that they were actually created. When in the process of this exhibition did you know you would realize the boxers?
Pretty early on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that was an early discussion, and we're thinking about different sizes. Is that right?
Yeah, we're thinking of different sizes, especially because for me, just having more than like a small number of options is super important. And I wanted to connect us again in this way, just like the world that we're living in right now. And it kind of jump started this idea of like a boxer exchange where it would kind of be like a chain letter, but without like the spooky stuff, right? Where each person would spend time with them and kind of document whatever is like important to them about washing and cleansing. And then the kind of chain lettery part, they wash them and they send them on to the next person. So the shorts are acting as a homage to 2000s fashion in boxers and the iconography of sagging as a style, and then also like the body, something that we're all kind of like transitioning and handing off to each other, kind of bridging us together that way.
Also a testament to your complete desire to connect despite the odds, in this case so many odds of COVID, and your desire to connect with other people in a really creative and imaginative and really intimate way came through in this boxer exchange.
Thank you.
Well, I have a question that I'm not sure is fully developed, but so bear with me. But one of the things that I've been thinking about is the relationship to your work in terms of the history of painting sex and desire, right? So it's talked about how sex is taboo in painting, right? But it's not really, because there's this long history of sex from a white male perspective, really, in painting, and desire from that lens. But yet, I mean, even today, if we show a painting by a woman with a penis in a museum, even if you see a penis in a museum, it's still a rare thing. And certainly if you see queer sex being painted about so honestly and so sort of vulnerably as you are. And so I'm wondering how you see I think your work is doing a lot of work in this area, but I'm wondering how you see that yourself and disrupting that history.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking it. For me, like I paint for like black and queer people, and I think that well, art is for everyone, but I think like in terms of like there's no place for whiteness or straightness in my work in that way. So it's like being the center of your own narrative, like focusing on the people who are me and like me. Like there's so many stigma and stereotypes about just like queer sex, and it's really important to me to like paint bodies that are relaxed and having black and queer joy. It's just about like their experience, what they're doing. It's not for me important to sort of talk about within like the space about the body sort of policing. So by it kind of just existing on its own terms, I think it's like a radical or like political act just to unapologetically exist in that sort of like realm of sex. And I think like too, yeah, just like an intimate sort of levels of how we perceive our bodies and stuff like that. Like cleansing, washing, thinking of ways to kind of like deprogram and decolonize ourselves. And I think it's important that we talk about this like openly, like what different ways sex can everyone look like.
Hmm. And I frankly think that the work you've done with showing anuses is huge. I mean that in a very serious way, because there is this relationship to our bodies that there are certain bodies and there are certain body parts that are okay to show, and others that are deemed not. And so I think, when you think about the work that you did with the Brodsky Center, which we didn't quite touch on yet, but bringing that image and all the symbolism that comes into it, whether it be as a portal or sort of fantasy things, I think is really quite incredible.
Thank you so much. Like for like the anuses, fun fact, the same tissue is made out of our lips. So kind of like mirroring those kind of things in like the landscape of the body. And like thinking of just like again like projections of stigma and expectations about being a black body and like the stereotypes of like everything is sort of like fetishized with like the dick. And I think that a lot of times when we think of sex, we're very like preoccupied or interested like on penetration. So like there's a lot like there's penises that aren't like desiring to penetrate, like they're just a part of like the body. And thinking about like being like a bottom, right, like just the everyday lived experience of many queer people, it's important that I kind of feel like bottoms need more props, like the anus is like something that is a part of her body and shouldn't be like eunuched or kind of like shied away from, that there's power in bottoming.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. There's a few more minutes left. If anyone has a question or a comment, anything, we'd love to hear from you.
If it's not too personal, Jonathan, Jodi mentioned in the beginning that you're on social media. You preach a lot of self-care, and that's part of your practice too. And I didn't know in this moment where I think a lot of us need self-care, kind of going into an interesting time, if there were any things that you're doing for yourself that, I mean, partly just because you're such a joyful human, and I love having heard you speak and share with us for the last hour. If there are any things you're doing for yourself that you might recommend, or just in general, kind of ways you're taking care in this moment.
Yeah, thanks for asking. For me, I am living with bipolar, so I'm always kind of constantly in a state of flux of thinking about ways to shift and be mindful with like my emotions. And I think it's really important now. Like we're spending so much time with ourselves that like the demon of capitalism is always kind of like asking us to always be moving, to be like an autopilot, to always kind of be that's kind of doing something and like kind of making us base our value off of our output. So for me, just kind of like really taking in little moments and just like kind of enjoying nature, or spending time trying to be more comfortable with the uncomfortability of my body not always being in motion. And like, yeah, bearing witness and understanding that like emotions come and go, and that might sound cliche, but it'll get like better, you know. Thinking of water as a motif in the work, I think about the weather a lot, which is also a motif, and just like thinking about like when it rains, it does eventually stop, you know, when it gets hot, the seasons change and stuff like that. So I think it's really important for people to just try to not be hard on themselves and reconnect with yourself. Yeah. Yeah. Take the time to slow down. Slowing down is really important.
Thank you for
Thank
that.
you. And on that note, send us off into our evening, but please feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like and say goodbye, say hello, say whatever you'd like. Thank you all for coming. And did we put all the upcoming events in the chat? We got that all, so everybody's good.
I'll drop in a link to PAFA's events, but I know that, Karen, if you want to highlight the opening real quick.
The opening is on Friday, January 8th from 6 to 7. And it was an amazing reinvention of Zoom because we're doing a live radio program with our friends at Philadelphia Contemporary, who designed an amazing radio program that Jonathan is the star of, and we're just excited to share it with you.
Wonderful. And I just dropped a link to some PAFA events upcoming. We've got another free lecture next Wednesday on Audrey Flack, not featuring her, but about her work and some other fun things to check out. So please look at that when you have time. But thank you all so much. Thank you, Jonathan, Karen, Jodi, our amazing partners, and everyone for being here. Please say goodbye on your way out.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thanks,
you,
Karen.
Jonathan.
Thank you,
everybody.
Bye, Jonathan.
Karen and
Bye.
Ashley.
Congrats, Jonathan.
Thanks, everybody.
Can't wait to see the show.
Oh, thank you. Everyone have a great evening.
Presuming, Karen, you know this, but there's another artist that I'm thinking about who has a bed in the middle of his studio. He's no longer living. He had a bed in the middle of his studio, pardon me. The important painter from Alabama, Mose Tolliver. And he would often, I don't know that you sit on the bed while painting, but he would often utilize the bed as a support while painting. Just bring that up to you because there's a real history there that I think is worth exploring further and exciting.
Thank you for
That would
sharing.
be a great show.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I know Susan knows the work well too. Susan just was on here too, but it's the first thing I thought of when I saw your photography.
It was definitely a sign.
What's that, Karen?
It was definitely a sign when I went to the studio. I was like,
For sure. Bye, everybody. That was amazing.
Hi, Brooke.
Everybody, it was wonderful. All of you were wonderful. Bye.
Thanks for coming, Ruth.
Thank you, Ruth.
Good to see you, Ruth.
It's great. Bye.
Bye, Ruth.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Jonathan.
Thank you, Jonathan. Oh, thank you so much.
Bye.
That was fantastic.
We have to speed through some images. I hope I didn't trip you up too bad. I just wanted to.
No, I was
lost track of time.
It was great.
Good.
I thought it was good. It was nicely paced. No, I thought you did a good job covering a lot of material.
You're great too.